On my birthday, my son came to visit. A rare thing these days. He walked in wearing his tailored gray suit, carrying a gift bag that looked far too expensive for the woman who raised him on thrift store clothes and coupons. The bag rustled as he set it on the table between us. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, smiling with that careful politeness reserved for clients and board meetings. Claire picked it out. The words slid through me like a thin blade. Polite, distant, impersonal. I had baked a small lemon cake the night before, just in case. He didn't notice it cooling on the counter. "Thank you, Daniel," I said, because that was what mothers said when they were trying not to cry. He sat, glancing at his phone once before locking the screen. "You're still getting the monthly allowance, right?" he asked lightly. $5,000 should cover everything here." My hand tightened around the teacup. "Allowance?" He frowned, confused. "Claire's been sending it since January. You didn't know? 8 months. 8 months of standing in the church pantry line, pretending I was volunteering just so I could take home a small box of canned soup and powdered milk. 8 months of wondering how the bills would get paid once the heating season started. I whispered, "No one has sent me anything." The smile left his face. He looked toward the hallway as if waiting for someone to explain. Right on cue she appeared, Claire, wearing silk the color of champagne and heels that clicked like tiny hammers on the hardwood floor. The smell of her perfume filled the room before she spoke. "Oh, Grace," she said sweetly, "we thought you'd moved the funds to another account." Daniel's assistant confirmed all the transfers. I looked at her. "Transfers to where?" She blinked, feigning surprise. "To you, of course." For a moment none of us spoke. The clock on the mantel ticked once, twice, loud as thunder. "I haven't received a cent," I said. "Not since Christmas." Daniel rubbed his forehead, uneasy. "There must be a mistake. Claire, show her the receipts." She slipped a phone from her clutch and tapped the screen with red-tipped fingers. "Here, 8 payments. All confirmed." The screen glowed between us, rows of transactions, neat and perfect, each signed Grace Hensley. My breath caught. The signature wasn't mine. "Grace," she said softly, "perhaps you forgot? You're not getting any younger." That was when I understood. Not the details, not yet, but the shape of it, the way deceit hides behind politeness. I steadied my voice. "Daniel, I've never touched that account. Someone's been stealing." He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled. "Mom, don't start this again." "Again?" "You always assume people are out to get you." His voice was flat now, practiced. "Claire's been nothing but kind. She keeps saying we should take better care of you, but you make it impossible." Claire's hand landed gently on his arm, a rehearsed gesture. "Let's not argue on her birthday." I turned to her. "You forged my name." Her smile didn't waver. "Why would I ever do that?" I wanted to scream, but something in me refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I looked down at the tea swirling in my cup and said almost calmly, "Because you think I'm too old to notice." Daniel pushed back his chair. "I'm not doing this." He picked up his coat. "I'll call the bank tomorrow and sort it out. But please, Mom, don't accuse my wife again. You've done enough damage." "Damage?" I whispered. He was already halfway to the door. Claire followed, pausing just long enough to rest her manicured hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry," she murmured, smiling as if she pitied me. "We'll make sure you're comfortable." When the door closed, the house fell into a silence that hummed in my ears. I looked around at the faded curtains, the unpaid bills stacked under the fruit bowl, the photograph of Daniel at his college graduation, the one where I stood behind him, proud and hopeful. That woman in the photo wouldn't have recognized this one. By evening, the cake sat untouched. I cut a slice anyway, because birthdays were supposed to mean something. I ate in silence, each bite turning to dust on my tongue. When I finally stood to wash the dishes, I noticed an envelope tucked beside the gift bag. No name, no return address, just my own handwriting scrawled across the front. It said, "Read when you're ready." Inside was a single page, typed, formal, cold. Notice of termination of residence. This property, effective immediately, shall be transferred to the ownership of Daniel and Claire Whitman, as per the amended deed signed and witnessed. My knees went weak. I sat on the floor, the paper shaking in my hands. Signed and witnessed, by whom? My name appeared again at the bottom, in neat, perfect cursive, that wasn't mine. I stared at that forged signature until the lines blurred. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hills, the kind that makes the windows quiver and the dogs bark down the street. So this was the real gift they'd brought me. I don't remember walking to the window, only the feeling of rain against the glass. Each drop looked like a question I didn't know how to answer. Then I saw the small figure across the street, a man in a dark coat standing beside a car, watching the house. When lightning flashed, I recognized him, Mr. Evans, the attorney who handled my husband's estate. He raised a hand in greeting and then slipped something through the mailbox before driving away. I opened the door, the wind pushing against me. In the mailbox lay another envelope, cream paper, the firm's seal pressed in gold. Inside, a single line written in his tidy handwriting. "Grace, call me as soon as possible." "There are irregularities in your deed." I pressed the note to my chest, trembling. For the first time that day, I felt something other than sorrow. Hope. Small, stubborn, dangerous hope. I turned back toward the empty living room, where the birthday candles still sat unlit. I struck a match and watched the first flame flicker to life. "Happy birthday, Grace," I whispered. "Let's find out what they've done." The next morning the rain hadn't stopped. It came down in steady sheets that turned the gravel drive into silver mud. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter from Mr. Evans. His handwriting was small and deliberate. Every curve of each letter pressed deep into the paper, as if even his pen understood the gravity of what it said. At 9 o'clock sharp, I dialed his number. The line clicked once before his calm voice answered. "Grace, I was hoping you'd call sooner." "I didn't sleep," I said. "You wrote about irregularities. What did you mean?" He hesitated. "Better we speak in person. I can come by this afternoon." By 3 o'clock, his black sedan appeared at the end of my drive. The wipers swept rhythmically, a small metronome of unease. I met him at the door with 2 cups of coffee, black for him, sweet for me. He stepped inside, removing his hat, rain dripping from the brim. "I reviewed the deed you signed after your husband's passing," he began, opening a slim leather folder. "And the one that was filed with the county 3 weeks ago. They don't match." My stomach tightened. 3 weeks ago? I haven't signed anything in years." He nodded. "That's the problem. Your signature appears there, identical to your original. Too identical. A replication, not a natural variation." I stared at the photocopy he laid before me. My name curved perfectly across the bottom. I'd seen forgeries before, in my years working at the library verifying donation records. Real handwriting breathes. This one held its breath. "Who filed it?" I asked. "Your daughter-in-law, Claire Whitman." He spoke the name without inflection, like a surgeon saying where to cut. "The document transfers ownership from you to your son and his spouse. No monetary exchange. She stole my home." The words came out small, almost swallowed by the ticking clock. Mr. Evans clasped his hands. "Not yet." The filing was incomplete. The county clerk flagged a discrepancy in the witness page. That's why I found out. Someone used my firm's stamp without authorization. My mind spun. Claire's smooth voice at the table, the pity in her eyes. She'd been planning this for months. What do I do? I whispered. First, he said, sliding a pen toward me, authorize me to act on your behalf. We'll request all transaction records. If what I suspect is true, she's not only forged your name, she's embezzled from your son's accounts to fund it. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Then I took the pen and signed. My hand shook, but the letters were mine. Flawed, human, real. He smiled faintly. Good. Now, do you remember any document Claire might have asked you to sign? Charity forms, bank updates, insurance papers? I closed my eyes. The memory surfaced. 3 months ago, Claire arriving with a folder, saying it was an update for Daniel's life insurance. She'd stood behind me while I signed the top page, her perfume thick as sugar. There was one, I said slowly. I didn't read it, Evan sighed. That's likely where the signature was lifted. We spent an hour combing through every drawer in my study. Receipts, bank letters, old tax forms, all ordinary, except for a small flash drive taped beneath the desk drawer. I didn't remember putting it there. Evans raised an eyebrow. May I? I nodded. He inserted it into his laptop. A folder opened instantly. Scanned bank statements, screenshots of wire transfers, and a spreadsheet labeled House Payments. G. The totals staggered me. 8 transfers, $5,000 each. The same pattern that had haunted my birthday dinner. Evans exhaled through his nose. These aren't from your account. They're from Daniel's personal one. Destination. A sub-account created under your name but controlled by Claire. She's been moving funds, disguising them as support payments. She used my name to steal from my son, I said. She made me look ungrateful and senile while she took everything. He looked up. People like that count on silence, Grace. They assume shame will keep you quiet. I met his eyes. Then she picked the wrong woman. A faint smile touched his mouth. That's what I hoped you'd say. Outside, the rain softened to mist. He gathered the papers into his folder. I'll start proceedings first thing Monday. But we'll need a witness, someone who can confirm you never received those funds. I thought of Sister Agnes at the church pantry, the woman who had quietly slipped extra cans of soup into my bag every Thursday. I know someone, I said. Evans rose, setting his hat on his head. Good, keep every letter and bill safe. And Grace, his voice lowered, if anyone comes asking about this conversation, don't answer the door. When he left, I locked the bolt and leaned against the frame. The house felt different now, not a place of quiet humiliation, but a fortress with purpose. The faintest crack of light slipped through the clouds. I spent the evening writing in my old ledger notebook, the one I'd used when managing the school library's budget. Each entry precise, date, description, amount. Truth arranged in neat columns. April suit, Evans visited. Found proof of forged deed and false transfers. Claire's pattern confirmed. Hope returning. I closed the book and placed it beside the telephone. For the first time in months, I allowed myself a small meal, a bowl of soup and a slice of the forgotten cake. It tasted sweeter than it had the night before. The phone rang just as I finished washing the bowl. I lifted the receiver. Static filled the line, then a soft click. No one spoke. Hello? Another click, then silence. I hung up, uneasy. Through the window, headlights flashed once from the street before vanishing. Maybe paranoia. Maybe not. I went to the drawer and took out my husband's old revolver. Empty, unloaded, just a relic. But I placed it on the nightstand anyway. It wasn't the gun that comforted me. It was the memory of the man who had believed I was stronger than I knew. That night, as I lay in bed, the wind moved through the trees like a whisper. I thought of Daniel, the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, now a man blind to the woman beside him. Someday, I murmured into the dark, You'll see the truth, my son, outside. Thunder rolled again, softer this time, like distant applause. And in that sound I heard a promise. The storm was not finished, but neither was I. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm but deceptive, like peace hiding beneath a storm. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, staring at the street that had once felt like home. Daniel's car was parked outside, gleaming and polished, while mine hadn't moved in months. He came by once a week now, not to visit, but to check if I needed anything. The word sounded like charity, not care. He'd bring coffee from a fancy cafe, stay for 5 minutes, and leave before the silence between us became unbearable. But that morning, something was different. As I placed my empty cup on the table, a soft knock came at the door. When I opened it, Mr. Evans stood there, briefcase in hand, his expression serious but kind. "Grace," he said gently, "I need to show you something." He walked in, setting the briefcase down on the kitchen table, the same table Daniel and I had once shared countless breakfasts at when he was a boy. Mr. Evans opened the case and pulled out a thick envelope sealed with the logo of Anderson and Holt. "Daniel's company. What is that?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Proof," he said quietly, "or at least the beginning of it." He unfolded a series of documents, bank statements, wire transfers, and expense reports, each with a familiar name on the top corner, Grace Walters. Only the signature wasn't mine. My heart pounded. "That's my name. But I've never seen any of these," he nodded. "Exactly. For 8 months, monthly transfers of $5,000 were being deposited into an account registered under your name. That's what your son believes you've been receiving." The room felt smaller suddenly. I could hear the faint tick of the wall clock like a hammer. "So it's true then," I whispered. "Someone's been taking the money." Mr. Evans hesitated, then slid another paper toward me, a copy of an online authorization form. The signature, though practiced, wasn't mine. It was hers, Claire. I sat back in my chair, air catching in my throat. Every elegant word, every polite smile, every "we'll take care of you," all lies wrapped in perfume. "Why?" I asked. "Why would she do this?" Evans sighed, his voice low. "Sometimes it's not about money, Grace. It's about control. Your daughter-in-law wants distance between you and Daniel. If you seem unstable or ungrateful, she keeps him anchored to her side." I looked down at my trembling hands. My wedding ring, thin gold, worn from years of work, gleamed faintly in the light. Control. The word echoed through my chest like a warning bell. Evans continued, "We'll need to gather evidence quietly. I'll contact the bank to request transaction logs under legal review, but we can't confront them yet, not without solid proof." I nodded, numb but resolute. "Do whatever you must. I've already lost my son once. I won't lose the truth, too." That night I couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, brushing against the windows like ghosts whispering through the dark. I sat at my desk, opened my old leather journal, and began to write, not just about the money, but every conversation, every visit, every strange expression Daniel had worn since his marriage. The journal became my witness. Weeks passed. Evans kept me updated through late-night calls and coded emails. "We're close," he'd say. "Just hold on." One afternoon, as I was hanging laundry on the porch, a black sedan slowed near my gate. The window rolled down just enough for me to glimpse a familiar silhouette, Claire. She didn't stop. She only looked at me, her lips curling into the faintest smirk, then drove off. My stomach turned cold. She knew. That evening, I called Evans immediately. "She's on to us," I said. He paused for a moment, then replied, "Then we move faster." 2 days later, Evans arrived with a small voice recorder. "Keep this," he said. "If she visits or calls, record everything." The truth has a way of revealing itself when people think they're winning. I kept the device in the drawer beside the phone, and sure enough, 3 nights later, the call came. "Grace?" Her voice was sweet, too sweet. "I heard you've been confused about your finances. Daniel told me you've been saying strange things to people. You're not trying to embarrass him, are you?" My pulse quickened. I kept my voice calm. "I just want to understand what's been happening, Claire." She laughed softly. "What's been happening is that you're getting older, dear. Sometimes memory plays tricks. But don't worry, we'll make sure you're cared for. Daniel doesn't need to know about every detail, does he?" Click. I pressed record. That single sentence became the spark that would later burn down her wall of deceit. The next morning, I handed the recording to Evans. He listened quietly, eyes narrowing with each word. When it ended, he looked at me and said, "Grace, this is enough to open an official case." I felt the air shift around me. The fear that had once paralyzed me was gone. In its place was something else. Resolve. For years I'd been the woman who smiled through pain, who stayed silent to keep peace. But that silence had cost me my dignity, my voice, and nearly my relationship with my son. No more. By the end of that week, Evans had filed for a preliminary review under the State Financial Exploitation Act. Subtle, quiet, but enough to make the ground beneath. Claire's designer heels tremble. When Daniel called a few days later, his tone was distant, cautious. "Mom," he said, "Claire told me you've been talking to some lawyer." "What's going on?" I took a slow breath. "You'll know soon enough, Daniel. I've just decided to protect myself." There was silence. Then he sighed. "You don't need to do this. You're making things worse." "Worse?" I said softly. "Son, the only thing worse than losing money is losing the truth." "I've already lost one. I won't lose the other," he didn't reply. Only the line went dead. That night, as I closed my journal, rain began to fall, steady, cold, and rhythmic against the window pane. I whispered into the quiet, "Justice may be slow, but it never forgets the address of those who deserve it." The next morning, Evans called again. His voice was calm but sharp with urgency. "Grace, the hearing's been scheduled. Monday, 10 a.m. Bring your journal. It's time." I looked at the brown leather book lying open on the table, the ink still fresh from last night's entry. And I knew. Everything was about to change. The sky that Monday looked bruised. A pale gray stretched over the courthouse like a warning. I stood on the steps clutching my worn leather journal. The chill in the air slipped beneath my coat, but inside me there was only heat, the steady burn of resolve. Mr. Evans met me by the entrance. He adjusted his glasses, nodding once. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," I whispered. The hallway smelled of polish and paper. Shoes clicked across the marble floor. I could hear murmurs from other rooms, divorces, disputes, the 1,000 quiet heartbreaks that fill places like this. But this was my morning, the morning a mother would face the woman who had stolen not only her money, but her son's trust. When we entered, Claire was already there. She sat beside Daniel, immaculate as always, ivory blouse, pearls, hair perfectly pinned. Only her eyes betrayed her, too bright, too alert. Daniel avoided mine. The judge arrived, his gavel striking once, a sound like glass breaking. "Case number 2047, he said. "Grace Walters versus Claire Walters. Alleged financial misappropriation and identity fraud." Each word echoed through me. I thought of the nights I'd stared at my bank statement, the hunger, the humiliation, the silence. "And then I lifted my chin," Mr. Evans began. "Your Honor, for 8 consecutive months, Mrs. Claire Walters diverted monthly deposits intended for Mrs. Grace Walters into a separate account registered under the plaintiff's name but controlled solely by the defendant. The total misappropriated funds amount to $40,000. He laid out each exhibit, the forged forms, the bank transfers, and finally the small recorder. He pressed play. Claire's voice filled the courtroom. Grace. You're getting older, dear. Memory plays tricks. Daniel doesn't need to know about every detail, does he? The words fluttered through the silence like a paper cut, sharp, irreversible. Daniel's head snapped toward her. His face drained of color. Claire rose suddenly. That recording is out of context, she stammered. The judge lifted a hand. Sit down, Mrs. Walters. Mr. Evans turned to me. Mrs. Walters, please tell the court in your own words what happened. My palms were damp, but my voice came steady. I trusted my son, and by extension, I trusted his wife. I believed every word they said about helping me. I never imagined the money he sent would be taken before it reached me. When I asked about it, she told him I was confused. But I wasn't confused, Your Honor. I was hungry. A ripple of whispers crossed the benches. I reached into my bag and lifted my journal. This book, I said, holds every conversation, every date, every time she came to my house pretending kindness. I placed it on the evidence table. Truth doesn't fade, even when you're told to doubt it. The judge flipped through a few pages, then nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Walters. Claire's attorney stood, voice clipped. My client maintains that all actions were part of household financial management, and that Mrs. Walters, the judge interrupted. Household management doesn't require forged signatures. He looked directly at Claire. Do you deny signing these documents? Her mouth opened, then closed. Silence. Daniel buried his face in his hands. After a long pause, the judge spoke again, his tone final. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony, this court finds the defendant guilty of fraudulent misappropriation. Full restitution of $40,000 is to be made to Mrs. Grace Walters. The defendant is hereby prohibited from managing or accessing any accounts belonging to her husband for 5 years. Court adjourned. The gavel struck 3 times, dry, metallic, absolute. Claire sat motionless. Then tears spilled down her cheeks, streaking her makeup. Daniel, please, she whispered. But Daniel didn't answer. He rose slowly and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. I followed the echo of his footsteps to the hallway. He was leaning against the wall, shoulders shaking. When he saw me, shame flooded his face. Mom, I didn't know. She said. I placed a hand on his arm. I know, son. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't cold anymore. It was fragile, waiting to heal. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft and persistent. We stepped under the awning together. Daniel exhaled, the breath of a man finally waking from a long nightmare. I'll make it right, Mom, he said. You already have, I answered. You believed me, he nodded, eyes wet. Can I come home tonight? I smiled faintly. Home never closed its door. Weeks later, a letter arrived, the restitution check, crisp and clinical. I looked at the numbers and felt no triumph. Money could never measure justice. I used part of it to repair the roof and the rest to start a small fund at St. Luke's Community Center, the Walters Fund, for seniors deceived by their own families. Every Thursday, I sit there with Mr. Evans, helping others fill out forms, listening to their stories. Pain looks different on every face, but the silence is always the same. One evening, Daniel walked in carrying boxes of brochures. I thought I could volunteer, he said. His voice was steady now, humble. You already know how to rebuild, I told him. That's the first lesson we teach. He smiled. A quiet, real smile I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Months passed. The fund grew, not in wealth but in purpose. Reporters came. I declined interviews. I didn't want fame. I wanted peace. Yet sometimes, when rain brushed against my window, I still heard echoes of that first Mother's Day. The bouquet, the lie, the silence. And I would whisper to the wind, "Thank you for breaking me just enough to see the light through the cracks." One spring morning, Daniel brought a small candle to my house. We placed it by the family photo, my late husband, Daniel as a child, and me. The flame flickered softly between us. "Mom," he said quietly, "I finally understand what honesty costs, and why it's worth everything." I looked at him, my son, not the businessman, not the husband who once chose silence, but the boy who had come home through the storm. "The price of truth," I said, "is high, but once you pay it, you never owe another lie again." Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering across the wet grass like silver threads. For the first time in a long while, I felt the world breathe. Justice hadn't given me victory. It had given me peace.